afternoon, good evening, a warm welcome, dear colleagues, dear students, dear friends. Welcome to this webinar. We have some 400 registered participants from 64 different countries. And as I speak, some of you are still connecting up. Today on September 18, we at the Magna Observatory each year celebrate our anniversary. An anniversary because of the first version of the Magna Carta Universitatum that was signed in 1988 in Bologna, exactly on this day. We usually do celebrate by having another anniversary conference, either in Bologna or in any other city with a university that is hosting us. We've been to Salamanca, we've been to Pitch, we've been to Uppsala, we've been to Sao Paulo, and we hope in the future we can have these in-person meetings again. But as you understand, this year our anniversary conference had to have quite a different format. Also this year we had planned to meet in Bologna, but we were having a meeting of sorts anyway. We'll be missing the chats and the stories, the dinners and the drinks. We will be missing the academic ritual, but we're meeting. And as I said, we have close to 400 participants registered, and we have a wider range of countries represented than ever. This is in itself already a beautiful illustration of the topic of this Short Friday webinar. You reach more people more easily from a wider range of countries when you do it remotely. So in exchange for the missing experiences, you get an upside nevertheless. The topic of today's seminar is what lessons are we learning from COVID-19? Well, this is the very first lesson. We are fortunate enough to have an alternative. I often think what it would have been like in my student days in the 60s and 70s to have a quarantine, a non-travel situation that we have now. We would have no alternative but to write letters or making very costly telephone calls. Before I go on to make some remarks on the topic, a couple of householding instructions. First of all, we are recording this session for future use and reference. So in a few days after this meeting of today, we will have an edited version of today's webinar on our website of Magna Carta Observatory, so you can use it or share it, whatever you like. Because we are many, we won't have the opportunity to have voice questions and answers. So we ask you to put your questions in the chat box that you find to the right of your screen. Via that function of chats to everyone, we can follow your questions, we can register them, we can group them, and we can get back to them. We hope to cover as many as we can in the question and answer session, but our time is limited this afternoon. So we might not have the occasion to deal with all and everyone, and we then plan to do that separately, remotely at a later stage. If you happen to get disconnected for one or another technical reason, no alarm, just reconnect, and our organizer will be reconnecting you and readmitting you to the room. Why this topic? Well, of course, because it's on everyone's mind. It is a timely topic. We are all in the same classroom these days. Academics, students, leaders in university, whole institutions, higher education systems, countries. Nobody knows the perfect way to deal with it. So we're all learners, because most of it is unprecedented. It is truly traveling uncharted territory. And if you're in uncharted territory, one of the few things that help you is a compass. And this is where our mission as Magna Charta is coming in. In times of crisis, or new conditions, or unknown challenges, we believe it is core values on what it means and what it takes to be a university, to be a good teacher, to be a good student. We need that kind of a compass to guide us. That was, in a way, the thing that happened, thinking back in 1988. In those days, the challenges were different. It was a time where we had a perspective of a new wave of international collaboration in higher education and research. And again, it was felt in those days that we needed a compass. We needed core values to know for ourselves and for our partners, for those with whom we were partnering, what was valuable, what was core, what was the basic responsibility, the basic principle of a university to be, guiding us in what was then uncharted territory. Same thing today. Today, we have experienced over the last 6 to 7 months a disruption in university life across the globe that in most of our lifetimes is unprecedented. Yet universities have endeavored to maintain their services to students, staff, and serve societies as well as possible, respecting the various safety guidelines. Impact, effects, consequences have been different in different parts of the world. We're going to address this situation and ask these questions. What lessons are we learning? Lessons learning, meaning not knowing the answer to everything, but being in the process of learning lessons from this present crisis and our behavior, the way we deal with these challenges. And we are fortunate to have 2 presenters who will address this issue. One looking at it from an international perspective, trying to show what in different situations, under different conditions, is the main challenge and what is happening there. And one zooming in on one individual university, facing the first-hand responsibility for thousands of staff and students in one particular country. The first one of those presenters is Eva Egron-Polak. She's a member of the Magna Carta Governing Council for almost 8 years, and she's the former Secretary General of the International University Association. And with that role comes a worldwide view, a worldwide perspective, a big and great network of people from all along. And it's against that background that she will be addressing this issue.
Yes.
I have great privilege in now giving the floor to Eva. Eva, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First thing I need to check is whether you can hear me. Okay, and then there is someone else speaking at the same time, so I'll wait until she hangs up, perhaps. Perfect. Thank you very much, Seibold, for the introduction, and good morning. I'm speaking to all of you from Montreal in Canada. So for me, it's morning, but I know that we have participants where it's actually afternoon, evening, very early in the morning. So thank you very much for joining us. I will now share my screen with you so that you can more easily follow the presentation. I hope this will work. And again, I can only hope that it will work. I think the title, What Lessons Are We Learning, is correctly an ongoing question mark, because we are in the midst of learning, as our chair has already said. I think it's also a time of crisis, and learning in a time of crisis and stress is not always easy, especially when the pandemic has had a global impact at every level of our life, as individuals, as communities, as countries and institutions. And at each level, we're having to learn how to act and interact in new ways. I also think that the number of opinions about what to do and how to respond and what the impact will or may be, the predictions of the future, they're all multiplying. And I think often contradictory and raising perhaps false hopes, but also anxiety. So please take my comments as very personal, both optimistic and pessimistic. I think we do need to be aspirational in our thoughts of the future and wishful, but I think we also have to be very realistic. And there are some fearful potential future scenarios facing us. We're still learning, and we're far from finding a new normal, if you will. But I think we already know that the pandemic has really shaken up traditional schemes. Rich countries and poor countries, reactions were not necessarily great in the first category and were perhaps much more sound in the second category. How democracies, or what we consider democracies to be, and totalitarian regimes have reacted has been different, with different results. The lines between rich people and poor people were blurred. Everyone is in the same classroom, as Seibold has said, and everyone can be ill. And in higher education, just on one dimension, the sending countries versus the hosting nations of international student mobility have reacted differently and have had different impacts. I think the pandemic also brought to light our thoughts about what is essential in our life and what we value and whom in our society we value or not. And that has been a wake-up call. And of course, the reactions and responses to the virus have differed and will differ according to or in line with the starting conditions in every nation, every community, including the availability and how comfortable we are with using technology. And I think in the case of the Magna Carta Observatory, it has been an important illuminating period to see how value systems are different and how they impact on our way of reacting. I think we all recognize that change in higher education is unavoidable and inevitable and will perhaps be long lasting. But at the same time, it may not be the same in all aspects of the higher education mission, nor in every country. I think that the pandemic has blurred the divisions between society and higher education as no other events in the last many decades. It has shown the immense socioeconomic disparities within countries, and including in education and higher education. And these have been exacerbated by the unequal availability and access to, but also readiness for the use of technology. I think it showed different approaches to what our individual and institutional and even government rights and responsibilities are. The right to privacy has been questioned in the country where I live normally, which is France. The collective versus individual rights and freedoms. Where is the balance between these? The notion of personal space. In Canada, social distancing is 2 meters. In France, it's 1 meter. And in each country, they're not respected fully, or they're respected very well, depending on the person. How we respect those rules has differed. I also think that the pandemic has really shown us the strengths and weaknesses of various political systems. We thought we were clear on what political regimes, such as a centralized regime, were all about. But we see that being a highly centralized country in a pandemic of this sort doesn't work. We do need to decentralize, and some countries have moved that way. So the strengths and weaknesses of our systems has been shown up. Of course, the economic regimes as well. But I think it's also shown the risks and limits of the level of economic and political globalization in which we live. At the beginning, the pandemic undermined the trust in multilateral and regional institutions, but I think over time that has also started changing. Even bilateral relations in countries like Canada, US were in threat. And within Europe, there were tensions between countries. So the pandemic really showed that things can change very rapidly from what we consider the norm. And I believe that higher education today and into the future will not be able to ignore these critical issues working at home, but also in the international cooperation that we will continue to maintain. For and in higher education, I think the pandemic showed us the vulnerability of humanity despite modern science and technology. We're still just human beings who can be facing this kind of a threat and not know solutions. And that's a wake-up call. But it also showed how tremendously resourceful universities and communities are. As Seibold said, we immediately saw institutions of higher education responding and maintaining services. So our capacity to adjust and show a strong sense of solidarity was visible very quickly. I think we also saw how unstable or volatile the trust and confidence in science can be. I think here too, there's been a waning. At first, we turned to science for the solutions. Then we began to see that science and experts had different opinions. So there was a mistrust that came as a result. Today, I think we recognize that without science and expertise and research, we will not find solutions. I think the pandemic and the fact that the lockdown was nearly global showed the high price of interconnectivity and the huge ecological footprint that internationalization and international collaboration can have. We also saw that the risk of exclusion for vulnerable groups is very high, including for our students with disabilities, international students who became stranded away from home. And today we're looking at the risks that come along with living in small social bubbles. I think it was also very clear that crisis management and preparedness in universities, let alone in countries, is absolutely essential. We also saw that higher education, no matter how international we say it is highly rooted locally, subject, of course, to local and national policies. And it is essential at the same time for social and economic reasons. A university that does not reopen means something to an entire urban center. This was very clear when University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill opened because the city really needed the students to be returning and welcomed them very much. But within a couple of weeks had to shut down again because of the impact that it was having on the spread of the virus. But the link between the city and the university was absolutely clear. We saw, of course, how financially dependent on international fee revenues some universities in some parts of the world are, and how vulnerable they are to these shifts. But also, I think, the surplus capacity that some systems have maintained because of international student flows is showing, and that will have an impact long term. We saw a lot of innovation and sharing of lessons like this one, this webinar, but there are many, many, many others where specifically communities are learning how to improve online teaching, how to maintain academic quality despite distancing. So this is the collaboration is continuing. And today, the uncertainties about reopening raise new issues about the longer term impact on learning, on the socialization of students, on the mental health and the anxiety levels of students everywhere, and of course on the future of international academic mobility, not just for the students, but also for academics. I think we're also looking at the risks of working exclusively online for academics, for researchers, for staff at universities. There's a sense of disconnect that can come about. And of course, there are rising numbers of burnouts caused by this. So for higher education institutions, this is, I think, a period of ongoing balancing between how to maintain academic quality, how to secure health and safety of students and staff, and how to maintain a viable economic base for each higher education institution. And I think that the one rule, as we have been reading articles, for example, the rectors or vice chancellors from 6 different parts of Asia wrote recently their experiences. And one thing that was a leitmotif in all of their sharing of experiences has been how flexible and how quickly and responsive they had to be at the institution level. So you don't have a plan A and B, you have a plan A, B, C, D, and maybe you will find one of those plans will really respond to the needs of your students and of your faculty. So another element of this ongoing balancing act is that higher education institutions are not working outside of the normal society. So we also have to follow the rules But we also depend on the overall state of the healthcare system. We need to make certain that the infrastructure and the human resources are there to use technology. And of course, we need to figure out potentially a new business model. And this will take a long time into the future to adjust for our adjustments. But I think as for the Magna Carta Observatory, one of the most important aspects of this pandemic has been that it revealed the importance of values. Values of solidarity, empathy, and partnerships that underpin and should underpin higher education were recognized and foremost. We also saw how important transparency and honesty is in reporting what is going on and in ensuring that there's trust. This works for the governments and government policies, but also in all higher education institutions. The government of France for a long time said, for example, that masks were not necessary or even useful, and yet it was really that they were unavailable for the mass availability that was needed. So that undermines trust in what policies are implemented. And so transparency and honesty has become a key. I think the value of intercultural understanding and understanding of why and how individuals respond to and obey rules and responsibilities, and why they do so and why sometimes they do not, is very important. The value of scientific integrity and collaboration has become very, very clear, and I hope will displace competition in the race for not just the vaccine, but solutions and treatments. I think we saw the importance of inclusion and the need to redress all inequalities as a key to a better world around us. And finally, the value of cooperation for finding solutions and for innovating may become a lot more important than having a greater market share of the best brains. For future higher education, what are we learning? I think we know that returning to business as usual is quite unlikely, at least not for quite some time. But also we're maybe going to rethink whether it is a desirable future. Higher education and education, generally speaking, is often highly inequitable. The way it operates, especially in terms of international collaboration, is ecologically unsustainable and perhaps not even financially viable. We'll be seeing, I believe, a reallocation of resources to improve online learning and teaching, and perhaps we will see less spending on international marketing, on mobility, physical mobility, and on the race to improve our reputation. Taking education to the learner, or blended learning, may be much more important, both for domestic and international students into the future, well beyond this current crisis. And perhaps there will be more offshore programs, more offshore campuses. I think internationalization will now focus more on curriculum. This has been a call by many, and this pandemic may be the catalyst that will really make the change. We will focus on curriculum, and we will focus more on cultural understanding without mass physical mobility. And I think we will see an ongoing systematic assessment of the risks and merits of virtual online learning and as alternatives to all academic work. Every time we hold a conference or a seminar or a meeting, we will think perhaps more than once whether it's necessary to meet or whether we can do so virtually. And I believe that higher education will continue to feel the need to have greater social responsibility. and play a role in the UN SDG goals. But I also think we need to learn for the future beyond higher education. I think the pandemic has brought about a major change in the view of the world that we have. And perhaps higher education will need to assume a role in inventing, predicting, and planning for a new set of socioeconomic and geopolitical realities. We will see perhaps that building local capacity in terms of production will be more important than expecting to rely on provision from across the globe. There will be, I believe, an increase in automation. We will not do away with the technology that we've been using in the last 8 months to help our lives. We will, on the contrary, use technologies in even more and new ways. So there will be perhaps new jobs and perhaps fewer jobs all around. We see already, and we will continue, I think, to see a shift in the importance of various world regions and production and trading patterns. I think that the last 8 months have shown how this shift may turn much more rapidly than we had perhaps predicted. And in Europe, at least, we're seeing a possible shift in the balance between where population growth will happen. Will there be more urbanization, or will people move towards the rural areas? Certainly, this has been the case in France over the last 8 months and ongoing. People are trying to find ways to live outside of very concentrated urban areas. And I think that the inequalities and social unrest that we have seen that are caused by racial, ethnic, as well as gender will
Eva, sorry, we cannot hear you. Can you switch the microphone on?
I thought it was on. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I won't go over the first part again because I don't want to waste the time, but I think that we
lost you the last 2 minutes.
Okay, well, let me just start with this slide then, with the last thoughts before I turn the microphone back to you. The past 8 months have been a confluence of several crises, not just the pandemic. The Black Lives Matter movement, the economic recession or slowdown, the fact that experts have linked the pandemic to our unsustainable exploitation of resources, the disruption throughout all of the education system, from primary to secondary to higher education. All of these will leave deep and ongoing scars, which we will have to deal with. In a sense, we're in a global experiment, living it in real time, where all the expertise that we can bring to bear from all disciplines to finding solutions, responses, and new ways of doing things will be absolutely critical. And I think this is an opportunity. And I know that many higher education institutions are already rethinking and reassessing what to change, how to change, what aspects of the response they have put in place they will maintain into the future. They are thinking about what trajectory to adopt for their own institutional development. And I will come back to what Seibold began with. I would ask the question, why not start with the values? As we rethink higher education, why not start with the values that are and should be central to all of our work? It's completely clear that higher education is learning valuable lessons now. And I also think it's clear that its future role in society and its international dimension will not be the same in the years to come. And I think that's not a bad thing. Thank you very much. Now, I will stop share and I will give you back the chair.
Thank you very much, Eva. That was a beautiful overview of a multitude of observations of what's happening worldwide. And this results in a truly daunting agenda, where not just the practical problems of how to work at a distance and how to work in remote mode is requiring our attention, but many other issues connected to it directly or indirectly. I want to remind all of us that this is the Magna Carta Observatory webinar on what lessons are we learning from COVID-19. This is the first of 4 scheduled webinars that will take place in the months to come. So we are adapting our usual conference program to the changed situation, and we'll use this method of webinars more often. In the chat box, you have the option, everyone, and if you want to register a comment or put a question, please use that function while presenters are presenting. So after the second presentation, we can turn to those comments and questions easily. It's now a pleasure to introduce our second presenter, who won't be speaking about the global situation, but will zoom in on his own university. Francesco Ubertini is not only a member of the Governing Council of Magna Carta, he, above everything else, is rector of Alma Mater Studiorum, the Università di Bologna. And his university, a very large internationally connected university with national students and international students, was one of those universities that were in the first line of attack of the virus, so to speak. So he was even to invent measures and policies and make strategic decisions before most of his colleagues had been woken up by the virus. Francesco, it's my pleasure to give the floor to you. Please tell us about your experience and your outlook.
Thank you very much, Seibold. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. If you can hear me, can you hear me? Yes,
yes, fine. Thank you very much.
I go to share my presentation. I hope you can see the presentation. Okay, and so in the next 20 minutes, I try to share with you my personal experience and the lessons we are learning during COVID time. I would like to start. I'm not okay. I like to start giving a flavor of our complexity. Let me see, okay. Here you see the number of students of University of Bologna, so more than 80,000 students. many international students, a lot of mobility students, both incoming and outgoing, and also Italian students come from different parts of Italy. And we have a deep integration with the city of Bologna, but we manage also 5 more campuses, 4 in our region and one small campus abroad. We manage 3 hospitals and so on. So you can immediately realize we are a very large institution, and we are not exactly what we consider an agile institution, but fortunately, we are resilient. We are a resilient institution. And I would like to show, if I succeed in, okay. That's the evolution of pandemic in Italy. And I would like, it is, the details of the graph are not important. I would like just to show you this, the evolution against time. This is the beginning of March in Italy, then April, May. And the first positive case in Italy, so an Italian citizen that had no previous contacts with infected people, was announced on February 21. So we are exactly before March, February 21, and he was in Codogno, that is a small city, 160 kilometers far from Bologna in the northern part of Italy. And this was the turning point that abruptly changed the scenario and triggered our decisions. And that's what happened at the University of Bologna. So the day after the first positive case, so February 22, I took the decision to suspend all the classes for a week. 3 days later, I had an urgent meeting with the board of directors, and I communicated to them the need to move all classes online, ideally in a week, but anyway, no more than 2 weeks. You can imagine which kind of meeting it was. So most of them was completely unprepared to such a message. They were confused, and I am sure that most of them thought that the rector got crazy. And after a week, so on the next Monday, March 2, almost 60% of our teaching activities move online, and the rest on the week after, so March 9. After another week, almost all the activities of my university were running remotely. So we were not prepared for that, absolutely not prepared. And also today, I'm still impressed by such a rapid transition. And I would like to share with you some thoughts that if I go back to February 22, and at that moment, I felt the urgency to take actions based on the information I was receiving about possible scenarios. But it was not an easy task, because any action would have had a significant impact on the lives of thousands of people. And any action was risky, as the national situation was very uncertain. And here I collect on this slide 4 basic principles that guided our actions. First of all, first priority, securing our community, so the health of our community. But we should consider that University of Bologna has never stopped since the foundation. Not even war stopped the university. So it was unthinkable that the virus caused our academic year to end ahead of time. There was no way we would allow such a thing to happen. And so the point was, we had to react fast and possibly in the right way. The third point was that we had to get through the storm while considering it as a chance to improve us as a university as a whole. So trying to seize the opportunity. And the message, and my message was, nothing should be cancelled. But we had to rethink, we had to reinvent our activities in a different way, in a way compatible with the emergency. And the last point that was mentioned also by Eva before, no one should be left behind. So inclusion, pay attention to inclusion. So great attention to vulnerable groups. Let's say international students, low-income students, faculties not familiar with online tools, but also staff that were non-digital staff. Based on this reasoning, I try to move ahead my presentation. Okay, we identified two key points in order to be successful in our actions. So they need to streamline decision-making processes, but at the same time, the most important question to me at that time was how to convey the sense of community in the days to come. So this is a very important point. I'll come to it later, but this is very important because my institution, our institutions, rest on socialization. And this prize as some unique feature that can be mitigated by social distancing. So it was very important to me, and I spent a few words later on that. So tight decisions, but also involvement and participation of our community. And the crucial factor was communication. A frequent and clear communication to guide the community through the storm, but simultaneously a communication that should instill commitment and trust. So based on this, I need to go ahead. Okay. Okay. On the February 22, we took the decision to move online all our classes and to create the conditions to continue all our activities with staff working from remote and in a different setting. I don't want to go through the initiatives in different sectors that we launched during the last month. I would like just to mention a couple of them in each sector. As far as teaching, I would like to mention two restrictions that we impose at the early stages. So during the transition, that in my opinion, are coherent with what I show you in the previous slides. So during the transition, we restricted professors in two ways. So classes timetables could not be changed. And all classes were to be delivered in a synchronous mode. So live stream. So the way that was most similar to the face-to-face lecture. And as I said, we pay a lot of attention to vulnerable groups. So we were particularly concerned with our international students, and we support them in various ways. That's, for instance, I make this example of international students. I say in various ways, so from the activation of a multi-language medical support service, to online groups for mobility students organized based on geographic area, also to help them to come back to Italy. An online psychological help service and an online transcultural consultation service. Just to mention that we consider a priority to be inclusive in the transition. At the same time, we continue our ordinary activity in a new way. Just an example I would like to mention, we reinvented our annual students fair for prospective students that with a huge effort, the fair took place completely online, and we had 33,000 students from all over the world. Let me spend a few words on research. I would like to mention two main actions. The first one was stimulating cooperation among research groups and the creation of new multidisciplinary teams in order to cope with emergency. And we got extraordinary results. And the second line was engaging our students in research initiatives. And I would like to mention just one of the opportunity, and I'm really proud of that. And this is an example. Transform Energy Now is an open innovation design process aimed at developing solutions to address real challenges in the second phase of the emergency. It was launched 2 or 3 months ago. And this initiative was promoted by Una Europa, that is the European Alliance to which we participate together with many other European universities, and involves students from all partner universities. And let me come back to the point of communication and sense of community. And the difference between the COVID emergency and other crises, or one of the differences, lies in the peculiar way to contrast and mitigate it. We all know very well we need to respect social distancing. And we experience a lockdown period. And so this is a very unique feature with respect to other crises we faced in the past. But we know that empathy, reassurance, hope for the future are critical factors to manage a crisis. So how to combine social distancing and empathy, and how to keep a sense of community that is so vital for the university in a remote setting. So I would like to spend a few words on my solution to that. It's a very personal solution. So I started to communicate to the entire community, students, staff, professors, PhD collaborators, so 100,000 people. And I start communicating daily. And during the first weeks, or during the first days, as you can imagine, these communications concern mainly safety protocols, organization of classes, exams, degree ceremonies, closure, reopening, and so on. However, from the very beginning, we use this kind of new channel of communication to instill commitment and trust, and to engage our community also with some extra activities that we organize, such as online evening lectures, morning training sessions online, live stream events with our Collegium Musicum, and so on. So we organize a lot of events with the goal to foster unity within our community, to maintain our role in the society. We were in the mid of lockdown, and we use a lot of social media. I would like to mention two of these initiatives. So one that was called Unibosera. We invite all our professors to give a short lecture on the so-called waiting time and of lockdown, waiting time of lockdown. And we offer these lectures every day from Monday to Friday at 9 p.m. And the goal was to invite the academic community, the citizens, to think about changing habits, fears, new forms of sociality, the perception of time, and our common future. And it was great to see and listen various voices from different backgrounds, reasoning about the same topic like an orchestra. And the second, every day at noon, anyone could listen to Words for Us, this short 3 minutes video where great artists of cinema and theater interpreted the words of Omero, Virgilio, Platone, Sophocles, Aristotle, Seneca, and so on. Words that have resisted time and can now help nourish a new hope. So I was told during such an uncertain period that living this virtual context and reading those messages was like receiving a daily bulletin, so containing information and instructions to follow, but they were also a source of comfort and proximity. And you can believe how many emails I have received, I am still receiving from students and their family who thank me for my communications and telling me how this helped to enhance their well-being and safety perception in a very uncertain moment. I go through the end, just a couple of slides to show you some feedback very shortly. We launched some surveys during the last months just to understand what was going on. That's the result of a survey on student satisfaction for online teaching. And what you can see, apart from the colors, is that the satisfaction was quite high. But this does not mean that they want to be always online or they prefer online to face-to-face lectures, but they appreciated the reaction of the university. And the same we experienced for our services. These are the results of a survey for students, faculty, and staff on the satisfaction for our services. That's a survey that we launch every year. So here you see 5 services, and for each of one, you have the results of 3 surveys. 2 years ago, last year, and the darker one is the survey we launched 2 months ago. And what we see is that the satisfaction, that's surprising, increased during that time. But this is not because the absolute quality of the service was better than before, but just because they appreciated the sense of community. And that's just some keywords for tomorrow, that is now today, and something that on which we are working on now. But I would like to close, because I am going to the end, to spend 1 minute on what lessons are we learning from COVID. And so from the organizational point of view, my answer is resilience and flexibility. In the last months, more resilience. In the next months, more flexibility. And for the role of the university, the role of higher education institution, I think I would emphasize our social responsibility, as Eva said before, and the need to have a stronger commitment of universities towards a more sustainable world, and particularly on United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And I agree with Eva, we are still learning. This is not the end. And finally, the very crucial factor for us was engagement of our community. And what we did during this period was thanks to people. So engaging our community was really crucial for us. Thank you very much, and I leave the floor to the president.
Thank you very much, Francesco. Very inspirational story about your 6 months with number 19, stressing resilience, making something that we used to think as nice and extra in teaching to be the core, and moving the whole university, also those who were always very hesitant to work in the remote mode. Same thing with the research agendas. They sometimes seem very inflexible, and suddenly it was possible to adapt them within weeks and reset them and have students play a role in research programs from one week to another. Well, in the past, they would probably take months to be discussed, if they would ever happen. And last but not least, stressing the key role of socialization, how to keep a sense of community. We take a couple of minutes, say 10 minutes, for some selected questions to which I would like your responses. First, to Francesco. One of our colleagues, Caroline, says this is all very admirable, yet we all know that a primary response to a crisis is often sort of mobilizing all goodwill and energy. How do you think you can keep energy levels for a longer period?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying. I have no definite answer on that. That's the point I'm working on today. We are in a phase that the emergency is still there. So I don't feel now the urgency to maintain this level of energy and cooperation among people that, as you said, many things that seem not possible, we succeeded to do that in a week or in a couple of weeks. What I'm trying to do now is working with my community. We have many moments, webinar, or now also some face-to-face meeting with social distancing, and we are reasoning about that, and we are trying to understand what really works and how to maintain them. So we are in a phase that I have no answer on that, but I'm in this moment, in our community, I stimulated a wide reflection on that. I posed this question exactly last week when I had a large meeting, and I asked for everybody to propose solution or propose idea, because I think that we can mobilize different actions in different sectors in order to maintain this kind of common actions, cooperation, and so I'm still in the way. I think that the first step now is that all the people in the community should be aware that this kind of energy is not guaranteed in the future.
Okay.
This is not an heritage. We should fuel it in the next months.
Exactly.
So, and I'm trying to increase the level of awareness now.
Yeah, thank you very much. Eva, we have a question from one of our colleagues, Vera, who said you talk about the need for a reset of the internationalization mode, from a concentration on travel and mobility to curriculum and cultural learning. Do you see good examples of how to do this, or is this something that we have to invent from ABC? Eva, we cannot hear you.
Okay.
Yes,
Someone
no,
else?
no, it's okay.
Okay. I think the call to focus less on mobility and focus more on curriculum in terms of internationalization has now become fairly widespread for the past, I would say, 3 to 5 years. I think the pandemic will make it happen much more quickly. And I think, yes, there are lessons and examples of where it has been implemented much better, but we are still learning, even in this area. I think there are also ways that virtual collaboration, programs like the COIL, collaboration online, international collaboration online, can nurture internationalization without moving and bring international perspectives into the curriculum. I think we will rely a lot more on looking at the content of what we teach and how we use international sources than sending people out to learn about other cultures. We will bring those cultures into our reading material, into our examples, into visiting faculty that can come online. I think one of the important things that you started with, and I think Francesco also pointed out, is that the fact that we can do things virtually can actually broaden the outreach that we have to far more parts of the world. There were 30,000 students at their open house, and there are more representatives of more countries in this webinar than ever at a face-to-face meeting. So making the, taking the opportunity of bringing visiting professors into the classroom virtually will become much more normal and will become much more attractive these days and much more viable financially. So I think those are some ways that it will happen. But I think what was needed was to recognize that this is the necessity.
Okay, on a slightly different but connected theme, one of our colleagues said, when you talk about values and ethics, it seems that we need to move, I think it was Costas who said this, that we need to move from an ethic of conviction to an ethics of responsibility. And in a way, our colleague Daria from Rudin University in Moscow said, it seems, listening to you, that we need a broader socio-political agenda and universities to be part of this sort of New Deal and maybe even be architects of it. So this would mean that not just the research agenda of the university is at stake, but also the view and the role, the contribution of university to society. Would you agree?
Maybe I'll start because I'm still unmuted. I think that's exactly what came through from the example of the University of Bologna, reaching out to the entire community, not staying within the higher education institution, but reaching out to the community to make certain that the community realizes the university is there. The university is sharing its resources, its expertise, its empathy with the community. But it's also linked to what I was saying, that this pandemic really broke down the walls between the university and society. The whole community was suffering, not just the students, the faculty, but also your next door neighbor. And we were all, in a sense, realizing that there's a collective, there's a need for a collective action. It doesn't happen only in one sector, it crosses all sectors. And I think two things that I didn't say and I should have said was the role of social media. We often know that social media can have a very negative impact on our lives. But I think the pandemic also showed how positive it can be, how it can mobilize, how it can facilitate. So research on what has happened and how to sustain the positive of what has happened will be an agenda for the universities. Communications was the other thing that I should have said, and I'm so glad that the rector insisted on it. Transparent, frequent, and honest communication is another responsibility that universities will need to integrate into all of their work, but also teach it to the students.
Okay, back to you, Francesco, and finally, because we are surpassing the agreed upon time limits, there are a couple of questions from colleagues on the issue of quality. The quality of the teaching, the quality of the study experience, the quality of the work we do when we move into uncharted territory and we use methods and means that we have not been using for ages. How can we, one way or another, guarantee the quality that we have to guarantee as universities?
Yeah, that's a main point. What we mobilize. So our first priority, I start from my experience and I ask the question. My first priority was to not to stop our activity and to continue in a way that maintain in some sense the live interaction among students and professors. So I said we prefer the stream live version of teaching, like this webinar, and we mobilized. That's something we were working also before the pandemic. We mobilized our Center for Teaching and Learning in the university. We started working on that when I became rector. I was not thinking to any pandemic, but and we have a group like many other universities, and we have a group of professors and a network. So we mobilize them that offer they help. We organize lab, we organize lecture, meeting with professors in order to with two scopes. So the quality, to be sure that the quality should remain at the same level. On the other side, help them to be comfortable with this new setting. And so, but from this point of view, we are still in emergency now because we are going to restart our activities on Monday. But now we have classes that are partially physical because we have students there in the classes, but we have also remote students online. So the class is in some sense broadened, so it's extended, and the new challenge is how to manage students and engage them, both the remote ones and the students face to face. So what we did up to now, we mobilized people, specialized professionals to help our professors to keep the quality and give suggestions, and we use also social media for that, come to what Eva said.
Thank you very much. A message to all of us: we have surpassed our time limits. I have two remaining tasks. First, to remind you that we would very much like to receive your feedback on the form you were sent there is a page that is asking, and a link that is asking for your feedback. We do really want to know about your experience, because as we said at the beginning, this is the first of a series of webinars. We will keep you posted on the program. We'll send you emails if you have registered. We are in contact already. And for those who are not, look at our website. The second the second task that is still to be fulfilled is, first of all, thanking the rector for his presentation and the picture he was sketching of the situation in Bologna. And dear colleagues, you can imagine what a pleasure it is for us as Magna Carta Observatory to be hosted by this fascinating university and be supported by this rector. Thank you very, very much for that. We most appreciate that, and we wish you all the best and hope you continue the good work. And then the very last, thank you very much, Eva, for your overview. As wide-ranging as ever and as thoughtful as ever. We have been enjoying your membership at our governing council for almost 8 years. I said almost because it's ending next Monday. You have been a very audible and useful, energetic member of our council. In a way, you have been very instrumental in widening the range of the work of the Magna Carta from its European cradle to the worldwide scene, which is now well established. And when you joined 8 years ago, this was only starting. So that's one of your really great contributions to open up your big and great network all around the world for us, give introductions, establish the beautiful collaboration we have with the International Association of Universities, which is now one of our strong partners. Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for your work on the Living Values Project, which is exactly on how universities can build their communities on values. You have been one of the architects of that project. Thank you very much for that. And last but not least, just like Francesco, you have been part of the drafting group of the new version of the Magna Carta that we have finalized and that we will be launching in our next large conference in June 21. Thank you very much for all that good work. Knowing you, I'm absolutely confident that you will remain not just a friend, but that you will remain a collaborator, and I look forward to that very much. Thank you very, very much. And thank you very much, all of you, for your attendance. Please send us your feedback and make sure you're with us again next time. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day and the weekend.
Bye, everybody.